Hello? Oh, sorry. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. And if you haven't been here before, or you haven't been to this class before, I just started a few weeks ago teaching a class based on this book called The Art of Happiness, which is written by an American psychiatrist together with the Dalai Lama. I mean, it's the psychiatrist who wrote the book, but he interviewed the Dalai Lama and includes a lot of quotation statements from the Dalai Lama. So it's about happiness. And so let's start with some meditation first, just a little bit of meditation to get our minds settled down. Is it too loud? Is it okay? It just seems very loud. So we'll do some meditation first, and then I have a slideshow dealing with a particular topic, tonight's topic, and then we'll do some more meditation at the end related to what I've been talking about. So first of all, make yourselves comfortable. As comfortable as you can. Try to sit with your back straight if that's possible, because that helps the mind to be more awake and alert and concentrated. But at the same time, be as relaxed as possible. So let your shoulders relax. And if there's any tension anywhere in your body, see if you can let it melt and flow away, flow out of you, drain out of you. You can imagine it going out of you and sinking down into the earth beneath us and disappearing. And let your breathing be a natural, steady rhythm without controlling or regulating your breathing. Just allow your body to breathe naturally in and out, but in a relaxed way. And now try to relax your mind. And that means putting aside or letting go of any thoughts that might be rolling around in your mind. Might be thoughts from things that you did today, things that happened to you today or just before coming here. So these are thoughts of the past. And the past is over. Sometimes it is useful to think about the past, but not continuously. So it's also good to give ourselves a break from such thoughts. And so you can do that now. Just give yourself a break from your thoughts. Put your thoughts aside. You can always think of them later if you need to. But just for now, give yourself a break from them. And also, there might be thoughts of the future, which could be plans you have for later tonight or tomorrow or the rest of this week and so on. So these are thoughts of the future. And again, it's useful to sometimes think about the future, but not all the time. So it's also good to give ourselves a break from thoughts about the future. So put those thoughts aside for now. And just let your mind rest in the present, the here and now. Just let your mind be right here in this room, in this place. And right now, in this present moment, and paying attention to the breath coming in and going out helps to be in the present, because our breath is in the present. It's not in the past or the future. It's right here, right now. So by paying attention to the breath, being aware of the breath coming in and going out, one breath after another. So that's a relatively easy way to relax the mind, calm down the mind, and let go of other thoughts, past, future, and so on. Just give ourselves a break and be in the present moment. So try to do that, but you might notice thoughts coming in, intruding in your mind, and that's completely normal, because this is what we do most of the time, thinking. So the thoughts don't like to stay away. They keep coming back. And that's okay. That's normal. No need to be upset about that or confused about that. But if thoughts do come, you can just, again, let them go. Put them aside, let them go. You can always think about them later if they're important. But decide to just keep your mind, your awareness, your attention right here, right now, in the present moment, being aware of your breath coming in and going out. So if thoughts come, let them go and come back to the breath. And it's also helpful to understand what thoughts are. They are not solid, permanent things. They are just aspects of the mind, appearances in the mind. The mind is not a solid thing. It's not a physical thing. It's non-physical, non-material. And also thoughts are not permanent. They come and they go, like clouds coming and going in the sky, or waves rising and falling on the surface of the ocean, or bubbles appearing and popping, disappearing. Thoughts are similar to that. They just come and they go. They're not solid, they're not permanent. So we don't have to pay attention to them. We don't have to get all involved with them. We can just let them come and let them go. And use the breath as a sort of anchor to keep your mind, your awareness in the present, right here, right now. And it's also important when we do meditation to do it within a state of mind of openness and friendliness, non-judgmentalness towards ourselves, towards our mind, our thoughts, towards others. And just try to have a very warm and friendly, kind, compassionate attitude as much as possible towards ourselves and others, everyone, everything. It's not always easy to feel that way, but we have to at least try. If we can meditate within that state of mind, our meditation will be much more satisfying and more meaningful and more successful. So try to have that kind of attitude as you're meditating, as you're watching your breath coming in and going out. And now, before opening your eyes and continuing with the class, see if you can generate that type of attitude I was just talking about towards all living beings, and feel the wish that what we are doing here tonight, what we're learning about and talking about and meditating on, that this will be meaningful and beneficial, not only for ourselves, but also for others. You can think of your own family and friends, people you care about, but also in a wider way, all the people in this country, all the people in the world, as many people and beings as you can think of, as you can open your mind to. Just try to feel the wish that what we're doing here tonight will bring benefits, beneficial energy to ourselves and to others. Okay, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And if you need to, change your position. Okay. So this is the third talk in the series that I started a few weeks ago based on this book, The Art of Happiness. And tonight we're going to look at a topic that's quite interesting, loneliness. It's quite interesting. Today when I was putting together this slideshow, I actually had fun. This is interesting. Loneliness is kind of a depressing topic, but I had a lot of fun putting this together. So I hope this class will be fun tonight. But before we go into that topic, I'll just do a summary of some of the main points that we've covered so far, in case some of you are just joining for the first time. So we've had 2 talks before. So one main point is from this quotation of the Dalai Lama: the purpose of our life is to seek happiness. So this is something he says again and again, and also most Tibetan teachers, lamas and teachers in the Tibetan tradition will talk like this, that we all want to be happy, and we're all trying to be happy, and we're all seeking happiness. So it's quite interesting. I mean, I've heard this so many times, and I just say, yeah, it's true. But I was watching one of the Mind and Life conferences. These are conferences with the Dalai Lama and various Western scientists and philosophers and educators and so forth, and they talk about different topics. So there was one just in the last year or two, and there was one woman, a Russian-American scientist who's, I think her field is linguistics, language, and she gave a really interesting presentation on this. And then she was sitting next to the Dalai Lama, and he was making some comments on her presentation and asking questions and so on. And he made this comment, about how everybody wants to be happy. And she said, "I'm not so sure about that." I thought it was quite interesting that she's standing up to the Dalai Lama. And she said that in her experience, she was born in Russia, and her family is Russian, but they moved to America. And she said in Russian society, she's not sure if people really want to be happy. There's more of an ideal. I can't remember exactly how she said it, but like the idea is life is really hard. There's a lot of suffering, and you just have to be really strong and tough and put up with it. Something like that. Does that make sense? I don't know if you have any experience with Russians, but anyway, she was questioning this idea that everybody wants to be happy. But then I think when we talk about happiness, and like when His Holiness talks about happiness, or they talk about happiness in Buddhism, it doesn't just mean this kind of whoopee, excited sort of happiness, like like when you go to the bar with your friends and you're laughing and talking and so on. But just just to have our basic needs fulfilled, like food and comfortable place to live, and friends, and feeling safe and secure. Just those very basic needs that we all have, human beings, but also animals. We want those needs to be fulfilled. And when they are fulfilled, there's a certain amount of comfort and happiness. When your stomach is full. When your stomach is empty, it's hard to be really happy. But when you get something in your stomach and that hunger is gone, that's really nice. Or when you're, warm instead of being freezing cold. So just basic comfort. I think this is what His Holiness is talking about. On top of that, of course, we want more than just that, but at least to have our basic needs fulfilled. So I'm sure everybody, including Russians, do want that. They don't want to be hungry and starving and cold and homeless. So I think when we all have our basic needs fulfilled, there is a kind of happiness or comfort. So anyway, you're welcome to challenge this if you want, but this is a basic kind of assumption that His Holiness makes, and also the book makes, that everybody wants to be happy. And that's also on top of that, Buddhism says that not only do we want to be happy, but we have the right to be happy and the ability to be happy. We can be happy. We can fulfill this wish to have happiness. Buddhism says everyone should be happy. And we have the right to be happy. And this is like, especially in Mahayana Buddhism, where we say that everybody has Buddha nature, That means the potential to be enlightened, the potential to be completely free of suffering and all the causes of suffering, and to have our mind totally transformed into enlightened mind and all the wonderful things that come with that. So this is true for everyone, every living being. So this is a basic premise in Buddhism. You may have a hard time believing it, but this is a Buddhist idea. We all can achieve happiness, not just ordinary happiness, like having our stomachs full, but really incredible happiness, the happiness of enlightenment. We can do it. That may take a while, a long time, but eventually, Buddhism says eventually everybody will get there. Everybody will get to enlightenment. That's a very kind of positive, optimistic view. And then Buddhism says that the way to achieve happiness, it's not going to just, drop down from heaven into our laps, but we need to work for it. We need to do certain things, basically training our mind. Happiness can be achieved by training our mind, and training our mind means reducing the disturbing negative factors in the mind, such as anger and greed and fear and depression and so on. So those are the things that interfere with happiness. Cultivating the positive aspects of the mind. These are things like love, compassion, kindness, generosity, and so on. So there's certain aspects of our mind that are negative, that make us suffer, others that are positive and make us happy. So we work on that, transforming our mind, and that's the way in which to find happiness. And also, this is another controversial question. According to Buddhism, and this is something the Dalai Lama emphasizes a lot, that compassion, this quality of compassion, of caring for others and, being close to others, helping others and so on. This is a basic part of our human nature, that everybody has basic compassion. And this is contrary to a popular idea in the West. And this is what the author of the book, Howard Cutler, points out. He says, in the West, there's a lot of people, scientists, philosophers, who have this idea that human beings are basically selfish and aggressive and greedy and competitive. This is our nature. Human nature is like that. And so the Dalai Lama doesn't deny that, yeah, of course, people do have these qualities of selfishness and they can be aggressive and greedy and competitive. Yes, we have those qualities too, but we also have compassion. We also have this basic goodness, compassion and kindness and generosity. And he says, you just point to, just look at, when a child comes into the world, when a child is born, there's this, in the ideal situation, this very close connection between mother and child. And the child survives by being close to the mother and drinking milk from her breast and being held by her. And it said that if a child doesn't receive not just food, but also affection, physical affection, the brain will not develop properly. So that shows that human beings need affection, need closeness, need kindness and compassion from other people, mother, or if not the mother, then somebody. So as human beings, we need this. We can't survive without it. We can't grow without it. So, um, so yeah. So it's there in our nature. And also studies that have been done recently are showing evidence that very small children, even like 3 months old, 6 months old, they show a definite preference for helping behavior rather than harming behavior when they watch cartoons and puppet shows and so on. They definitely are more attracted to those characters that are kind and helpful, and not those that are kind of nasty and harmful. So that also shows that this is there in their nature, this recognition of kindness and wishing for more of that kind of behavior. Um, yeah, and I came across this quotation from Trungpa Rinpoche, who is the teacher of Pema Chödrön, and she repeats it as well, that everybody has a soft spot. I don't know if you know that expression. We say that in America, a soft spot. Are you familiar with that? Yeah, it's kind of not just something physical, but something in your heart. You know, we all have a soft place in our heart. And he says everybody loves something, even if it's only tortillas. um, so we all have the ability to feel softness and gentleness and love and caring, and it may not always be there. We may sometimes feel really angry and, you know, aggressive, but there are moments where we do feel a softness. For example, when there's a baby around, you know, when you see a baby or a little puppy or a little kitten, a little animal, you know, especially those kinds of small and cute and helpless beings, you know, they bring out that soft spot in us. They help us get in touch with that soft spot. So everybody does have that. And then it just needs nourishing. It needs to be nourished, needs to be developed. So it's present more and more and more of the time. And that's really what Buddhism is all about, is how to get in touch with our basic good nature and make ourselves more familiar with it so that it's there more of the time. It's present. It's part of our lives more and more and more and more and more. Okay, so then this is what we talked about so far. And now we get to this topic of loneliness. And the way this comes up in the book is part 2 of the book is called Human Warmth and Compassion. And it starts with a section on loneliness. And how this came about is Howard Cutler was, waiting to have a meeting with His Holiness. And while he was waiting, he was looking at a newspaper. And in the newspaper, there were page after page of personal ads. Is that what they're called? You know, somebody's looking for a friend, a partner. Yeah, so there were like pages and pages of these kind of ads. Lonely people looking for friends, for companions, for partners. So when Howard Cutler went in to meet the Dalai Lama and sat down, the first question he asked was, do you ever feel lonely? Do you ever get lonely? And this is probably a question people wonder about. Somebody like the Dalai Lama, who's been a monk his entire life. I think he's more than 80 years old now. Never got married, never had a wife, never had a... So I think people tend to wonder about that. Or like me, you know, people often wonder, well, don't you get lonely? To not have the usual close relationships with other people. So before getting to the Dalai Lama's answer and the discussion around that, I'd like to look at some other information about loneliness, because I started Googling and I found lots of information about loneliness. And apparently it's been on the increase. It's getting, more and more frequent in people's lives. And some people even describe it as an epidemic. And this is a quotation from Mother Teresa. The biggest disease today is not leprosy or cancer or tuberculosis, but rather the feeling of being unwanted, uncared for, and deserted by everybody. So this probably goes back many years, because she's passed away many years ago. But I think it's even more true today. And studies have shown that loneliness, this feeling of loneliness, is actually physically harmful. It's dangerous. It's a risk factor for high blood pressure, heart disease, lower immunity, and mental problems such as depression. It can be twice as deadly for the elderly than obesity. I don't know if that's correct grammatically, but anyway, it's, obesity is considered, quite a dangerous thing. a risk factor for a premature death. But what the scientists, doctors have found is that loneliness is even more deadly, more harmful for one's health than obesity. So people can die as a result of loneliness. Of course, we die anyway, but die more quickly than otherwise. So it's that bad for us. It's that harmful for us physically. That's just talking about our physical health and so forth. But then also emotionally, it can lead to depression. It can lead to alcoholism, suicide, of course. I think many people commit suicide due to loneliness. And loneliness, when we hear about loneliness or think about loneliness, we probably think about elderly people, who are alone in their homes, in their houses or apartments or in nursing homes. Um, but also people who are chronically ill and not able to get out and move around much, people who are handicapped and also kind of bedbound or housebound, people who are widowed or divorced. Okay, so we tend to think about those kind of people when we think about loneliness, but apparently it can affect everybody of all ages, children, teenagers, and so on. So everybody, probably everybody experiences it at least sometimes in their life, feeling of loneliness. And there's different ideas about why is there more loneliness today than in the past. It seems to be on the increase. So a few possible reasons are there's just in our society and our culture, there's more focus on me as opposed to the community, the individual. I am important, what I want to do, and I have to live my life and do my thing and so on. So that kind of thing is much more emphasized than community. Also, more focus on wealth and success than on relationships, people, especially young people. I the TED Talks on YouTube. It's called TED Talks. There's all these really interesting speakers giving talks. So one day I can't remember his name, but he was an American psychologist. And he had been involved in a study. He said it was the longest running study that's ever been done. It went on for 75 years, and it involved more than 700 men in America. So it started back in the 1930s. Okay. And they followed these men from the time they were young boys. Some of them were just boys or teenagers. So they followed them all through their life. And those that were still alive were now in their 90s. So all during their life, 75 years. And it was just checking different questions about them, their health, their happiness, well-being, and so on. And the results of this test showed that the things that made these people most happy were not wealth, success, and that kind of thing, but relationships. Having close relationships with people, spouse, or at least friends, family. That was the thing that was most satisfying, most meaningful, most important in their lives. Relationships, close ties with other people. And this person giving the talk said that nowadays, he used the term millennials. Are you familiar with that term, millennials? I guess it's people who are now in their 20s and 30s. So probably some of you. Anyway, when they are asked what is most important in their life, what are they most concerned about, most interested in, the things are wealth, fame, and achievement, like being successful in your work and so on. Not relationships. They don't mention that as being most important. So it's just the opposite. When you check a person throughout their whole life, what's really meaningful for them, what's really satisfying for them is relationships. But you look at people who are younger right now, and they're more concerned with, of course, this is a generalization. It may not be true for everybody, but many are more concerned with money, being rich, being famous, being successful. So anyway, his talk seems to support this idea that nowadays people are more concerned about wealth and success than relationships. And also another factor might be more people are moving to cities. I just read about this in the Danish news recently. They say that the rural areas are emptying out. The cities are growing. So more and more people are coming to live in cities. And in cities, there's more loneliness, ironically, isn't it? Because there's more people. But people aren't connecting with each other as much. Out in the rural areas where aren't so many people connect with each other much more. There's more friendliness, more communication. But in the cities, I mean, just think about, I don't know, if you live in an apartment building, do you talk to your neighbors in your apartment? No. So we live right next door to each other. Same building, same floor, there's very little communication. I mean, that's not true of everybody all the time, but it's very common in cities. People just don't talk to each other. Yeah. So there's loneliness. People stay in their houses and their apartments, with maybe by themselves or with small family members, and suffer from loneliness. So anyway, this is the situation, and it's not so positive, is it? But there are things that we can do about it. So I came across this article by a woman psychotherapist in England, Philippa Perry. She's also a writer. So she had some useful tips on dealing with loneliness. First is to acknowledge it non-judgmentally, meaning because sometimes people are afraid or reluctant to acknowledge that they're lonely. They don't want to admit it. They may feel ashamed. There may be a feeling of shame, or just an unwillingness to acknowledge it. So this is the first step, is to admit it. If you feel lonely, if you have loneliness, admit it. Don't try to deny it or pretend that it's not there, because that's not going to work. It's not going to go away. And also, don't judge yourself for feeling lonely. Don't feel ashamed. That she says sometimes people may feel it's a sign of failure. If you're successful, you're not lonely. You have lots of friends. So if you're lonely, that means there's something wrong with you. You're like a loser, a failure. Do you have that idea? That loneliness is so people don't want to acknowledge that they're lonely. They'll do anything to avoid acknowledging it, because then that means they're a loser. Nobody wants to be a loser. So it's helpful to understand that it happens to everybody. And it doesn't mean that you're a failure. Everybody can find themselves feeling lonely sometimes. And it's not necessarily your fault. It could be because maybe you had a partner and your partner became ill or left you or died. It's not your fault. It's not, not something you made happen. It's just circumstances. So this can be helpful to realize that it's something everybody experiences. In fact, in Buddhism, traditionally, there's long lists of different kinds of problems, different kinds of sufferings that we experience in life that we're supposed to meditate on in order to realize that this world that we are in is actually suffering, the First Noble Truth. There's a lot of suffering here. So we need to develop the wish to become free, to become enlightened and free from our suffering. So one of the sufferings mentioned is suffering of loneliness. It says we are born alone, we die alone, and even during our life, even sometimes there may be many people around, but we can sometimes feel alone. So it's part of the human condition. It's part of samsara, unenlightened existence. We all experience loneliness sometimes. So it doesn't make sense to then feel ashamed and feel like you're a failure. And then she also says something interesting. She says it's a necessary feeling, just like hunger. So just like when our stomach is empty, we feel hungry, and that means we need to eat. So if we have a feeling of loneliness, that means there's a need there. We need to be with people. We need to connect with people. And we're social animals. His Holiness says that as well. Human beings are social animals. We're not meant to be alone. So if you're feeling lonely, maybe that means you need to connect with people. You need to spend time with people, not just stay by yourself. And she also says, look out for unhealthy attitudes. She says sometimes when people feel lonely, they can react or respond with certain attitudes that are not healthy and not helpful, but just can make us feel worse. So she says there's often this fear of rejection. This might be related that we're afraid of getting close to people, trying to make friends with people because we feel they may reject us, that we may be hurt. Yeah. So that might cause us to be more sort of protective of ourselves and closed off to others. So this could be one factor related to loneliness. Fear of getting close because of possibly being rejected by others. And another thing that happens sometimes is feeling inferior or superior to others. So this could also be connected with loneliness. We may feel, oh, everybody's better than me, everybody's smarter than me, everybody's, up there and I'm down here. So feeling that we are somehow inferior to others, that can lead to loneliness. Or on the other hand, feeling superior to others. I'm smarter than everybody else. I'm better than everybody else. Everybody is below me. So whether we feel inferior or superior, this causes us to feel distant from others, to feel unconnected from others. And that exacerbates loneliness. Does that make sense? So these are things that might be going on in our mind, if we are feeling lonely. And we need to look out for those. And then withdrawing, just staying by yourself, not going out, not trying to be with people, and possibly thinking, I don't need anybody. This is another thing that can sometimes happen. It's just like, well, I'm okay by myself. I'm better off by myself. I don't need anybody. So we may say that to ourselves, but maybe we're lying to ourselves. Maybe we're, just trying to justify our situation. But it could be actually a denial of a real need there. So these are things to look out for. And another possible one, she didn't mention this, but I'm thinking about it myself in the context of Buddhism. Because we have this example of the Buddha sitting all alone in the forest, meditating all by himself. And also, not just the Buddha, but stories of meditators, hermits going off into the forest or going off into a cave in the mountains and just sitting there all alone meditating. So this can lead people to think, well, that's how I should be. I should just stay by myself and meditate and work on my mind and not get close to other people. That's somehow an ideal. And this may be true for some people. It may be that some people are able to live alone and be very happy and do well in their meditation practice and their spiritual practice and so on. So some people can be like that, but not everybody. And if we try to be that way and it's not really suitable for us, then it could actually be harmful. In other words, if you try to force yourself to be like the Buddha or be like the Dalai Lama and, withdraw from people, but if it's not really right for you, then you might end up being depressed and not being able to meditate properly. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So I think each of us needs to get in touch with ourselves and what's suitable for us. What kind of life is most suitable for me? And not try to compare ourselves with other people like the Buddha, like the Dalai Lama, or other, monastic, celibate people and think, oh, I should be like that. I should be like them. It may not work for you. So look out for those. And then recognize the dangers of loneliness. So if you do experience loneliness, know that it is harmful, as I mentioned before, how it can be harmful for your physical health and also for your mental health. Yeah. So it's dangerous to be lonely. And then make an effort to get connected with others. Don't just stay by yourself if you feel lonely. You have family. I hope everybody has some people they can be with, family, friends, also clubs. I think here in Denmark this is quite popular, isn't it? They call it, what do you call it? Forening, yeah. Associations, also volunteering. That's another way of being connected with people, going out, and there's lots of opportunities. I found a website for volunteers. If you want to volunteer, you can just, they'll point you in the right direction. So these are ways to be with other people. And also, they say, I've heard studies, scientific studies say that when we do volunteer, we're with people, doing things with people, doing things to help people, and so on. It actually has an effect on us physiologically. There's more endorphins. Have you heard that? They call it the helper's high. You have more endorphins in your system. So there's scientific proof, physiological proof that being with people, especially in helping people, does make us feel better, feel happier. So anyway, back to the Dalai Lama. um, so when Howard Cutler asked the Dalai Lama if he ever feels lonely, the Dalai Lama says, "No, I never feel lonely." And Howard Cutler was very surprised because most people do feel lonely sometimes. So he asked the Dalai Lama, "Why? Why do you never feel lonely?" So these are the things the Dalai Lama said. He says he always looks at the positive side of everyone and therefore feels affinity and connectedness. So that's an interesting thing. And that kind of relates to one of the points on the previous slide, um, of feeling superior to others. Because if we have kind of judgmental, critical, fault-finding attitudes in our mind towards other people, if we have this habit, I know I have this, my mind works that way, seeing faults in other people, in their attitudes, in their behavior, in their appearance, so always finding faults in other people. So that kind of attitude makes you feel distant from others. You feel distant and disconnected, and like, oh, I don't want to have anything to do with that person. They're like this and like that. So having that kind of attitude of seeing faults in others, seeing negative things about others, that's a cause of loneliness. So what His Holiness is saying here is he always tries to see the positive side in people. He sees good things in people. And that naturally makes you feel closer and connected with other people. Does that make sense? So that's one way to feel less lonely and more connected. Because loneliness involves feeling disconnected, feeling distant, feeling separate from other people. So if we can stop feeling disconnected and feel connected, like His Holiness sometimes says, wherever he goes, he feels everybody's like a brother and sister. Yeah, and I don't know if you've ever been to any of his talks, but when he first comes out on the stage, he says, my dear brothers and sisters, something like that. He addresses everybody as brothers and sisters. And I don't feel it's just words, he's just saying nice words, but he really seems to come from his heart. He really does feel that way. My human brothers and sisters, we are all part of one family. So if you really thought that way, if you really felt that way, that all the people in this world are like my brothers and sisters, wow. So that's one reason why he doesn't feel lonely. Another thing he said was he's not worried about having to act in a certain way to win others' respect. So this could be another reason for feeling lonely, being concerned about what other people think. Do people like me? What do they think about me? Do I look okay? Do I act okay? Yeah, this is a big worry that people have, what others think of you, what others think of me, how I look, how I appear. Yeah. So if that is there in your mind, that kind of thought, that kind of concern in your mind, that also causes a feeling of distance from other people, almost like others are potential threats, potential dangers to me. They might dislike me, they might reject me, they might say something unkind to me. So if you're feeling that way in relation to other people, then naturally there's a feeling of distance and disconnectedness. So he says he doesn't care about that. he doesn't he doesn't worry that he has to act in a certain way to get people to like him. And you can see that again if you watch him. He's so natural. He's so almost like a little child sometimes, joking and laughing and teasing people, you know. So he's like really natural. And so again, that helps to feel more connected with others. And then Howard Cutler asked him, "Well, can other people be that way? How can other people become like that?" And the Dalai Lama says, by seeing the importance of compassion, wanting to cultivate it. In that way, your attitude towards others will change. So I think again, this he's talking from his own experience, seeing how important compassion is, that state of mind of compassion, being connected with others in a caring way, you know, caring about others, caring about their unhappiness, their suffering, their problems, wanting to help them, wanting to make them more happy and comfortable and peaceful. So that feeling of compassion, you know, is naturally a way of connecting with others. So he says, if you can see how important compassion is, how beautiful compassion is, how beneficial compassion is, and naturally then you want to cultivate it. So just by that, then your attitude towards others will start to change. So, oh yeah, he also said, and don't wait for others to be friendly towards you. Take the initiative. So this is something we might do sometimes. We have the feeling, well, if that person is friendly towards me, then I will be friendly. But we're afraid to make the first step. We're afraid to, you know, smile, say hello, make some friendly gesture. We're waiting for the other person to do it first. And if they don't do it, then okay, too bad, that didn't work. Does that make sense? So again, you can see this in him. He, you know, complete strangers. In fact, he tells a story in this book of the Dalai Lama was giving teachings in Arizona, and he was staying in a hotel, and the teachings were being held in a conference room in the hotel. So when the teachings were over, then the Dalai Lama would be walking back to his room in the hotel. And one day they passed by a maid, you know, maids who work in the hotel. I think she was Mexican. And she was just standing by an elevator, waiting for the elevator. And His Holiness went right up to her and started talking to her and asking, "Where are you from?" And da 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 da. Just, you know, just casual conversation. And then she looked like really, you know, blissed out by this. And then every day after that, more and more maids or staff from the hotel were standing by the elevator waiting when the Dalai Lama went by. So for next day it was 2 people, and then 5 people, and then 10 people, and then a whole line of you know, maids and cooks and other people in the hotel waiting there, you know, to have a chance to see His Holiness. So that just shows how, you know, if we take the first step of being friendly to other people, then it may not always work. Yeah, if the other person is in a bad mood and a bad state of mind, maybe they're not interested in, you know, talking to you. But it might help. They might be very grateful for that friendly gesture. So anyway, these are things that the Dalai Lama says about why he never feels lonely. Yeah.
Yeah, Denmark, more than in the States, you kind of have to be a little bit careful that if people like are in the wrong mood, they want their own space, and you have to be careful not to come into their space. I mean, if you're not invited.
Mm.
So, I mean, of course, you can give a nod or something like that, but Americans are more, just talk to strangers more.
Oh, okay.
There's more, not so much. There's a little more, like it takes longer to get to know people here, but then sometimes the friendships longer too.
Mm, okay.
Yeah.
You have to be a member of a union. Apply for membership.
Yeah, but I don't think he necessarily means actually getting into a deep
Yeah.
conversation, but just being friendly.
Yeah.
You know, he says, sometimes says, you know, whenever he sees somebody or meets somebody, always, you know, smiles and says hello. And he says, yeah, sometimes people look angry at him, but, you know, many times people smile back. So even just to smile at people can be a kind of a way of connecting with others. But we have to be prepared. They may not smile back, not be offended by that. Okay, okay. So it's not my fault if he's in a bad mood.
But Dalai Lama's way of experience the relation is also very pure. As you say, in our part of the world, we usually always have something. We want something out of relation. If you give a gift, you're expecting, you're waiting for somebody to be appreciative, something like that.
So,
So even if he doesn't get recognized by the other one, it doesn't hurt him because he didn't expect it.
oh, right, okay. So you're saying most of the time here, when people are friendly to somebody else, they're hoping for something in return, expecting something in return.
Not necessarily, but many of the things we do in everyday life has to do with that, like starting a family, having a job,
Mm,
gaining wealth, whatever, friendships.
to get something for oneself.
And Dalai Lama doesn't expect that.
Yeah, I mean, his mind is quite highly developed, and we can't expect that we can be like him. But still, I think some of the things he says could be useful for us. I'm going to share some more, but would you like to stop for a break? This is our usual time for having a break. You ready to stop? Yeah? Okay. 10-minute break. There's coffee and tea and biscuits upstairs. So another thing about loneliness is that it's not the same as being alone. So I just invented this. This is my own idea. That this is the relationship between being alone and feeling lonely. It's possible to be alone and not be lonely. Yeah. So I'm sure we all have that experience sometimes. You might be alone at home, busy doing something, involved in something, and you don't feel lonely. You don't miss company. And it's also possible to feel lonely even when you're not alone, right? Sometimes you could be at home with a family or at a party or at a crowd of people. Lots of people around, but you feel lonely. But there's also cases of both. You could be alone and feel lonely. In fact, that middle area probably should be bigger than it is, but I didn't know how to do that with a computer. But anyways, I think it's interesting to differentiate this, and think and understand that um, they're not necessarily the same thing. Yeah? That you can be alone but not feel lonely. You can be quite happy being alone, and you can also feel lonely even when you're not alone. Um, so being alone is sort of just a neutral state. It's a fact. Yeah, sometimes we're just alone. Whereas feeling lonely is sort of a emotional state, and usually a painful one, right? It's unpleasant. It's something we want to get away from, want to get rid of. So I think that my thought is that if we do feel lonely, it's fine to seek companionship, be with people, family, friends, go out and volunteer or join a club or whatever. So try to find ways to um, relieve that feeling of loneliness, connect with other people. But on the other hand, I think it's also good to learn how to be alone and not be lonely, to be alone and not feel lonely. In other words, how to deal with aloneness so that it isn't painful. Does that make sense? Because there are inevitably times when, even though we may wish to be with certain people, our friends, our family, but we may not be able to. So it's good to learn how to deal with being alone and still be happy. Does that make sense? And it is possible. I want to share some things from another book that I came across. It's called How to Live Well with Chronic Pain and Illness by Toni Bernhard. So this is a woman who was a law professor for many years, married, children, grandchildren, and then she suddenly became chronically ill. She got this illness and it never went away. So she found herself most of the time alone at home in bed, unable to go out, unable to be with people, unable to work, being alone, sick and alone. And so in this book, she said she used to enjoy being alone sometimes when she was busy, in her life. She would really like having times where she was alone, and then she could practice her mindfulness and just, be by herself. But when she became chronically ill and had to spend most of her time alone in her bedroom, she didn't like it. She didn't enjoy it at all. So she had to learn how to deal with the loneliness. And in her book, she does share some advice on what can help with loneliness. Some of this is what we found before. Let go of self-blame. So don't blame yourself. Don't think there's something wrong with me. I'm a failure. I'm a loser. It's not your fault if you're lonely. It's not a bad thing. But don't blame yourself. And then accept the loneliness. Accept it. That's also on the previous list, that just acknowledge and accept it. And she said, make room for it in your heart. Instead of trying to push it away, deny it, reject it, go away, I don't want you, but just accept it in a loving way. Even if it's an unpleasant feeling, but don't reject it. Let it be there. She also said it's good to investigate the loneliness, the feeling of lonely. What triggers it? Are there certain things that trigger the feeling of loneliness? Like she said for herself, it was when she would hear people talking about their plans to go here and do this and do that and have parties and vacations, and she couldn't join them because she was so ill. So that would trigger off her feelings of loneliness. So what triggers your feelings of loneliness? What causes it? Is it worse on certain days or certain times? How much of it is the result of wanting to be with others, and how much is due to not feeling comfortable with your own company? So that's another interesting thing. You know, a lot of people don't like being just by themselves. I don't want to have to be with myself. I can't stand myself. So one of the remedies to that is to generate compassion for yourself, which we'll look at next. Another thing, she said, look at your mind. And is your mind telling exaggerated stories? For example, I will always be lonely. This might happen, you know, you're feeling lonely and you may think, oh, I'm going to be like this forever and ever and ever, every day of my life. It's never going to stop. It's never going to go away. That's probably not true. It's a transitory feeling. It's not going to be there forever. Or nobody loves me. Everybody hates me. That's probably not true either. It must be people who love you. Or nobody else is lonely like me. That's probably not true either. So your mind might be making up these stories, saying things to yourself like this, which are not true or which are just exaggerated. And if you can recognize these and not believe them, not, you know, buy into them and believe them, but see them as just exaggeration. And then things to do to transform the loneliness. So one thing she says is give yourself compassion. Be compassionate to yourself. For example, saying things to yourself. You can make up your own phrases, but these are just suggestions that she makes. Just saying to yourself, it's hard being alone when others are having a wonderful time. Or it's not my fault that I'm lonely. Or simply, I understand you are suffering at this moment. I wish you to be happy and free from this suffering. So just find some words to say to yourself, talk to yourself that are kind and friendly instead of, oh, you're such a loser, you're such a failure, you're horrible, you're, you know, nobody loves you. You know, those kinds of statements that our mind might be saying, which certainly don't help and just make us feel worse. So say nice things to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be compassionate to yourself. And another thing that's good is to just remember that it's transitory. It's not going to be there forever. It's there right now, but it's going to pass. And the interesting thing is, I've said this before with other emotions, anger and so forth. If you're trying to push it away, reject it, oh, I don't like this, go away. And that just kind of makes it stronger. Whereas if you can relax and just accept it, okay, there's loneliness right now, or there's depression, or there's anger, whatever it is, just accept it. Sometimes just by that, it will go away, it will pass. It's kind of magical. So just accept it and remember, it's not permanent, it's transitory. It's not going to be there forever. Another thing that's helpful is to remember good things about yourself in your life. Maybe when you're feeling lonely, you're focusing on faults that you have, mistakes that you made, things that are wrong with you, things that are wrong with your life. So you're just focusing on negative things. So instead, remember good things about yourself. I'm not so bad. I have this and I have that. And my life is, you know, better than a lot of other people. So just focus on good things that can help to get you out of this sadness. So this isn't something from her book, but it's from the Tibetan tradition. It's part of the practice called Tong Len, taking and giving, where we, there's different ways of doing it, but a simple way is when we do have some problem, some painful feeling, some painful experience, instead of trying to push it away, to just accept it, allow it to be there, and then say to yourself, by my accepting this suffering and experiencing this suffering, may the suffering of all the other people, you can think of all the other people who are lonely. I read something once, it was quite nice. It was written by a Catholic priest, because Catholic priests are celibate. And so, yeah, being celibate is lonely sometimes. So what this priest would do is when he would find himself feeling lonely, he would think about all the other people who are lonely. For example, people who are mentally disabled, mentally ill, and or physically ill, and are just not able to find a partner. Yeah, I mean, that's the case with people who are physically or mentally ill. Sometimes they're not able to find anybody who wants to share their life with them, so they can be very lonely their whole life. So he would think about, or people in prison, prisoners, and so on. So there's lots of people in the world who are lonely, and it's not really their choice. It's not their fault. So he would think about all the people who are lonely, and then just meditate on compassion for them. So that's similar to this idea of, all the other people who are lonely. I wish they could be free of their suffering. I will accept this suffering on behalf of them. May they all be free of the suffering of loneliness. So that's a way of transforming this experience of loneliness, instead of, oh, poor me, I'm so sad, things are so bad, I'm so lonely. Instead of thinking like that, just thinking, wow, I'm not the only one who's suffering from loneliness. Lots of other people are as well. May they be free of their suffering. So it completely changes your attitude, your state of mind, and makes it into something kind of beautiful and positive and compassionate, rather than miserable. So these are, again, things we can do when we can't be with people or whatever, right? So it's not to say that we should just sit there and deal with our loneliness. It's fine to seek company, but it's also good to learn how to deal with the loneliness when it is there. And also, this is again from Toni Bernhardt's book. She said, being alone isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can make you more sensitive, more aware, more creative, more concentrated. So this is something she found herself in her experience. All the hours being stuck in her bedroom alone, these are benefits that she found. And I did read on one website about, it's been found that being alone does help you to have more concentration. When you think about it, if you want to do something, you want to work on something, write a book or paint a picture, if lots of people are around making noise, it's harder. Right? So it definitely helps your concentration to get things done if you have times alone. And it can also help you in your spiritual practice. I mean, look at the Buddha. Yeah, he was off in the forest all by himself meditating. And many people do that in all religious traditions. They deliberately choose to go by themselves someplace and meditate, because you can have incredible spiritual experiences when you're alone meditating or praying or whatever. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. That's the point. Being alone can be quite a wonderful thing. So this is the last slide. I'm just going to talk about some traditional Buddhist antidotes to loneliness, and then we can do some meditation on them. So one is to focus more on the sameness of oneself and others. I put that in plural because samenesses, there are ways in which we and others are the same. So this is similar to what the Dalai Lama was saying, just feel this connection with others. We are human beings. Yeah, it's true, we are different. Each one of us is different, is unique. Nobody else is exactly like me. But there's a lot of things we have in common, a lot of things we share. We're human beings. We have human bodies with, arms and legs and eyes and a brain and blood and tears and sweat, and we all come from our mothers as tiny little babies, and we drink milk from her and we cry. And so we have so many things in common, so many experiences in common, and we all want to be happy. This is one thing the Tibetans always talk about. All sentient beings just want happiness, and we don't want suffering. We don't want pain. We don't want unhappiness. That's actually incredible meditation. It's a very simple idea, but contemplating that and making your mind really familiar with that, that me and others, all these people around me, all the 7 billion people in the world, basically, we just want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. Nobody wants suffering. This is something that unites us, something we all share, we all have in common. So contemplating that really helps to remove barriers between yourself and others, and just make you feel closer to others, connected with others. And this is another thing that's helpful. Remember interdependence and gratitude. We are not isolated and totally independent. We need others. If it weren't for others, we wouldn't have food to eat. We wouldn't have clothes to wear. We wouldn't have a house to live in. We wouldn't have cars or bicycles to ride around in. We wouldn't have roads to travel on. We wouldn't have electricity, water, right? If you took away all the other people in the world and you were just all by yourself, how could we survive? How could we even go on living? Would we even want to go on living? Yeah. So just recognizing how we are dependent on others, how maybe dependence isn't such a wonderful word, but just how much others do for us, how much others are helpful for us, and feel gratitude for that. Feel gratitude for what others do for us. So that's another way of feeling more connected, more close with others, and less lonely. And of course, cultivating love and kindness and compassion. The more we can feel love, I want others to be happy, and compassion, I want others to be free of suffering. The more we make our minds familiar with those attitudes, we'll also feel more connected with others, close to others. So from this is from a different book, not this one, but it's a book called The Book of Joy. And it's actually His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, the Archbishop of in South Africa. Desmond Tutu, yeah. Apparently they're great friends. So this is a book with quotations from the two of them. So anyway, the Dalai Lama says, much depends on your attitude. If you are filled with negative judgment and anger, you will feel separate from other people and lonely. But if you have an open heart and are filled with trust and friendship, even if you're physically alone, even living a hermit's life, you'll never feel lonely. If you are always thinking about the 7 billion human beings, you will never experience loneliness. This is what His Holiness does. He thinks about the 7 billion human beings in the world, and he feels they're all my brothers and sisters. So anyway, let's try some of these in meditation, just to see how they might be helpful for us. Maybe we could turn this machine off so it doesn't make so much noise. So I think it's helpful to start with ourselves and get in touch with what we ourselves feel deep down in our heart. So the Dalai Lama and other Tibetan lamas often say everybody just wants happiness and everybody just wants to be free of suffering. So this is actually a feeling that we have deep down inside, deep down in our heart, almost like a little voice down there that's saying, I just want to be happy. I want to be loved. I want to feel safe, protected, cared for. I want my needs fulfilled. And I don't want to suffer. I don't want to be hurt, to feel pain, to be rejected, to be alone, to feel unsafe, unprotected. So those kind of things, whatever words there may be in your own mind and your own heart, but just see if you can go deep down inside of yourself and get in touch with that feeling of just wanting happiness, wanting good experiences, and not suffering and bad experiences. And don't think there's anything wrong with feeling this way. According to Buddhism, it's our right to be happy and not suffer. It's completely okay to feel this way. It's not wrong. It's not selfish. It's just a natural feeling that we all have. And we all deserve to be happy. We can be happy and free of suffering. So it's fine to feel this way. So see if you can accept this feeling without rejecting it or thinking it's wrong. Now let's think about how other people have the same feeling in their minds and their hearts. So start with someone you know and have a good relationship with. You find it easy to like this person and care about this person, be with this person, a friend or family member. Try to have a mental picture of that person in front of you. And contemplate that in that person's mind or heart, they have the same feeling, wanting to be happy, wanting to have good experiences, to feel safe, protected, loved, cared for, and not have pain or problems or bad experiences. And then spend some time thinking about other people. You can think of other friends, other family members, and each person you think about, each person that comes to your mind, say to yourself, this person is just like me. They want happiness and they don't want to be unhappy. They don't want suffering. So you can use your own words, but whatever words work best for you to get this understanding, this feeling. And now think of somebody you don't know so well, you're not so close to. You could choose one of the other people sitting here in this room, or a neighbor, or somebody at work. Again, focus on that person. Try to have a mental picture of that person. And then contemplate how that person also has this feeling inside their mind or heart of wanting to be happy, to be cared for and loved and feel safe and protected, and to not be unhappy or have pain or problems or bad experiences. Now think about all the other people sitting here in this room. We are all human beings. We basically have the same kind of body, same kind of mind, same kind of thoughts and feelings. Each one of us is different, unique. But there are some things we have in common, some things we share. We all want happiness, good experiences, not bad ones. We don't want suffering or pain or problems. And the same is true for the rest of the human beings on this planet, the 7 billion human beings. Each one of us is unique, but we have some things in common, such as that we don't want suffering, we don't want pain or problems. We don't want to be hungry, cold, thirsty, frightened, in danger. We want to have our basic needs fulfilled. We want to be happy and safe and comfortable. So this is kind of a simple idea. May even seem sort of ridiculously simple, but it's very profound. And we can do this contemplation anytime, anywhere. When you're with people, when you're home alone, um, even just to spend a few minutes contemplating how everybody has this feeling inside of wanting to be happy and not unhappy, just like oneself. So the more we make ourselves familiar with this, get used to thinking this way and feeling this way, then it may take time, but it definitely does help us feel closer, more connected with other people. And that in turn can help us feel less lonely and isolated and disconnected. So we got a few minutes left. How about if you just get together with one or two other people and just share with each other something you found useful or interesting. Hopefully you found something useful and interesting in tonight's talk. Something that you learned that you think is useful for you and you would like to take home with you and keep with you. So just for about 5 minutes.
I think it's just one of those, you just said, just to close your eyes, just visualize that every being wants to be happy, maybe even the mouse. I don't know about the insects. Do they want to be happy, the insects?
Sure. They don't want to die. They don't want to get squished.
So they also like a full stomach. And,